It's okay. Well, thanks for the invitation to speak, and thanks for coming to my talk. I'm going to build on the three talks we heard that are quantifying the pollution and have validated these models, and I think they're all in good agreement with each other, both for ozone, and we are also in good agreement with the MIT model. And I'm going to take it one step further to calculate the health effects and see, and I reached the unfortunate conclusion that this may be an important limitation. I want to start by acknowledging my co-authors. Jay has done all the, Jay has done all the pollution simulations. Jost is my co-PI, and Daven is the expert on health effects. And I've been basically being his grad student, bugging him. It's like, I'm getting really high numbers. What am I doing wrong? I'm like, no, that's what it is. Okay, and this is the most difficult talk I had to give in my career. I'm not happy with the results, but they are what they are. And I think we, as a community, we need to work around this issue, which is more serious than certainly I thought. Okay, so we know that air pollution causes substantial mortality. This is often in the news. This is from WHO, and the Global Burden of Disease studies, is one of the largest causes of preventable death. So in principle, it's highly problematic to create pollution indoors where we spend most of our time and where we don't have the buildings shielding us. In the recent fires, like when there was all the smoke here in New York a couple of weeks ago, the first thing public health said is, don't go outside if you don't have to. Because basically, if you're inside, the building is reducing the particle concentration by a factor of 2. If we generate the particles inside, we don't have that benefit. So the question is, well, are we still, do GUV222 systems, given their practical application, do they make enough pollution to be of concern? David yesterday argued that they don't. I'm going to argue that they do. And that's the question I'm going to try to answer. Is there mortality from GUV222 pollution? And if there is mortality, how does it compare to the number of lives we save with this very effective disinfection? And I will address this couple of comments that have been made. One is if the ozone is below the occupational thresholds of 50 to 100 ppb, then the pollution is not a problem. And note that those are occupational, they are for workers. They do not apply to nursing home residents, hospital patients, or school students, even though people use them in that way. The other thing that I've been participating in an ASRE committee, and they've been very patient with my ignorance of how ASRE works. And at the meeting last week, they were saying, well, as long as it meets, the location meets the ASRE ventilation limits, then the pollution is not a problem. So we're going to examine whether that is true. We're taking the validated model where we think the ozone and the PM is validated, and it's not something very advanced in our field. It's pretty basic, as previous speakers have mentioned. And we're going to do a case study trying to keep it simple. Okay? So I'm going to take a cross-section of 1% of the US population and the conditions for COVID and the flu in December 2022, and just try to get the order of magnitude for a base case without mitigations. Okay? And so don't worry about factors of 2 or 3. We're trying to be fair, but I should say that there is more chemistry than what we are simulating. So yesterday, someone was asking, what about VOCs being broken directly by light? We know that happens. That has been known for 100 years. The question is it important, or are we doing chemistry with flame retardants, or what about the ultrafine particles? I could give another talk about things we don't know that could be important, but my feeling is that what we are simulating is the most important. Yeah. So now, how do we estimate the benefit of this infection? So this is, some of you may know that with Lydia Moraska and Kat Noakes and Don Milton and Shelley Miller, we spent a lot of time trying to convince WHO during the pandemic that COVID was airborne, and as part of that work, there's another paper that actually Jay also led, in which we took all the super spreading events of COVID where there was ventilation data, and we plotted the number of people, the attack rate, how many of the people present got infected, as a function of one single parameter that captured, ventilation, activity, time. That was one of the contributions of the paper. You can actually rigorously show that you only need one number to capture the risk. And we showed that the Wells-Riley model, a box model, basically can reproduce the pattern of infection. This paper is very close to my heart. I think it shows that the super spreading events are dominantly airborne. But I won't go into that. All I'm going to say is that we have a model that we believe is credible to predict the benefit. Okay? And I'm going to show all the rest of my talk is going to be in this format that Jay has introduced, in which we have the ventilation rate from very low, as you may have in some homes, 0.12, very high, 30 more than in most places. And then I'm going to have a factor of 1 million influence rate. And having a large range allows us to see the trends better. And then here at the top, I'm going to have these limits. And now Holger has educated me that, when we run at the ACGAH limit, we're actually at much lower values, which is in this range. This is where we think ICNRP will be done. And this high intensity, this is talking from Kevin Esvald, who I believe is in the audience from MIT, who has been exploring applying these lamps at very high intensity. So now, and some people were telling me yesterday, well, it's not fair to assume these lamps will be applied in homes. People won't do that. And it's like, I beg to differ. I've seen during the pandemic that people do that. And this is a paper, in which, they were studying, people were just buying UVC lamps off the internet and they were applying them, So I think we do have to study low ventilation rates. And this is the benefit, okay? So this is all my plots are going to have a color and a contour of the same quantity. So here is, for example, we're reducing mortality, let's say in this case, by 100 per year. 1% of the US population would be 1,300 deaths per year. But, we cannot prevent some of the ones in close proximity. So, something of the order of 1,000, and the more fluence rate and the less ventilation, the more GUV helps. So now we're going to calculate the disbenefit, which is going to be mainly the particulate matter. It's not the ozone. The ozone kicks in the chemistry, but it's the particle that does the damage. So Shelley showed this plot in her talk yesterday. This is the famous 6-city study. And what they showed here is that, for example, when particulate matter increased 20 micrograms per cubic meter, the unit we use for that, the mortality rate increased by 25%. And this is the study, the more recent study from the Global Burden of Disease. This is what WHO does, which has a very similar slope, depending exactly where you are. There are details, but again, I'm trying to get at the order of magnitude. So if you increase particle concentration by 1 microgram per cubic meter, we increase the all non-accidental mortality by something of the order of 1% or something like that. So for 1% of the US population, that will be 26,000 deaths per year, would be 1% of the non-accidental mortality. If we add a microgram per cubic meter and we increase that by 1%, then we're adding 260, a mortality of 260 per year. Okay? So 260 is not that different from 1,000. So this is hinting that maybe the mortality from the pollution is not going to be negligible compared to the benefit of disinfection. Okay? Now, what mortality are we talking about? So this is going to exacerbate the death rates of things like stroke or COPD. If you increase that by 1%, we're not going to notice that this is due to the lamps. So this is hard to evaluate except through these statistical methods. So now coming back, Jay already showed these plots. This is what the model says in these coordinates, how much ozone we make and how much PM we make. So I'm going to take these plots and apply the health functions to calculate the mortality. So this is how it looks for ozone, and all this white area were below the threshold of 27 ppb of the most updated study. So then we don't have any calculated deaths. Now, if we go to this very high intensity regime beyond the ACGAH limit, we can get some mortality for ozone. Now, on the same color scale, I'm going to show you PM, and you're going to see that it goes to much hotter colors and much higher numbers, and also has this inclined shape, and it's a lot less forgiving. So even within the ACGAH limit, we can have, 10, 100 levels, or 1,000 levels of mortality. Okay. So let's see. So I'm going to sum both of them. It's still mostly PM, but just used to be complete. And I'm going to try to answer these questions. Are we protected from this mortality if we meet the ozone occupational TLVs? So where are those TLVs? They're here. So if we are to the left of those lines, we're meeting the occupational TLVs. And still, we can have 10, 100, 1,000 increased mortality. And so the TLVs, I argue they were not designed for this. They are totally antiquated. They don't make the connection between ozone and PM. I think it's inappropriate and completely incorrect to try to use them in this. And they only apply to workers. So I think we shouldn't use them for this purpose. What about the asteroid ventilation? So the asteroid ventilation is not specified in these units. It's a more complicated thing, but you can calculate this number. But depending on the type of a space, you end up with a different number. So the lower level number that meets asteroid ventilation is here. So for the ACGAH, you could still have, 100, almost 1,000 excess mortality. There are many values in between. This is now the high value, so depending where you are, they're over here. If you are at the high value, then the numbers are much lower. So that is more protective. So now I've calculated the benefit and the disbenefit. So let's take the difference. How much is the net benefit? How much is the mortality reduced overall when you consider both effects? And that is this plot, again, in the same format. So if we are to the left of the red line, we have a benefit. We are saving more people from airborne disease than we're losing to pollution. Now, if we are on the right, we have a disbenefit, and you see that this benefit can get very high at the very high intensities. So to try to understand what happens here, let's look at that particular simulation. This meets the ACGIH limit, and it meets the ASHRAE ventilation for many situations, and it meets the ozone TLVs. So what's going on here? So we have 291 people that we save from disease according to the model, but we lost 40 to mortality for PM. So the net effect is that we get to keep 86% of the net benefit. Okay. So now, how much pollution did it take to lose those 40 people? Not a lot, and this is the key, that these effects are very strong, and this is something I certainly didn't appreciate. So ozone only increased by 1.4 ppb, and it stayed below the threshold. And ozone itself didn't cause any of the mortality, and it produced 0.1 micrograms per cubic meter, and that was enough to increase the mortality by 40. And we said earlier, a microgram per cubic meter is maybe 300, so a tenth of a microgram per cubic meter is 40. It makes sense. It's just the health functions are very strong. Okay. So now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take this number, this 86%, so the next benefit, and I'm going to plot it in this format to see, what percentage of the benefit we get to keep. Okay? So this is here, and this is the pixel where we're looking at before. So it's 86%. That was between the isopleth of 75 and 95. And what you see is, again, here we have positive values, and here we have negative values. Within the ACGIH box, at low ventilation, we're in trouble. As we increase the ventilation, things are better. If we meet at least that minimum ASHRAE limit, then we're doing better. But as I was discussing this with my wife, what you see is that we never are at 100. We're never not losing people to pollution in this whole phase space when we do things in this simple way. And she was telling me, you have a trolley problem. And I'm like, what's a trolley problem? Turns out it's a famous philosophical problem where there is a trolley that's out of control. It's going to kill these 5 people, and this person can act on the switch. But if they act on the switch, these people are safe, but then this person dies. Okay? So it's an unfortunate situation to be for the technology. This is, again, when we don't do mitigations. They only gave me 12 minutes. We have done simulations with mitigations. Of course, they help. But anyway, that's where we are. So let's see. So this was up to here. Everything was 222. Let's look at 254 briefly, running the model in the same way. And, sorry, I was going to say the IC-NIRP limit is looking a lot safer to me than the ACGIH limit. Now, if we look at 254, this is where we end up, in the same format. So, to the left of the red line, we have a benefit. To the right of the red line, we have a disbenefit, and this is, again, the percentage of the safe lives that we get to keep. It's kind of unfortunate, but the CDC recommendation ends up where there is no benefit or disbenefit. But this is a much easier problem to solve, okay? Because you need 2 ingredients to make PM from 254. The light itself and ozone that comes from outside. It's much easier to remove the ozone in the ventilation system. And if we remove the ozone from the ventilation system and we don't have ozone, this all goes away. Then you only have a benefit. So these are my conclusions. Again, I did a base case, and we're open to do perturbations, and we've done some of them. I'm going to argue, people are working around the skin problems and whatever. We need to work around the air quality and do smart uses of this technology in which we maximize the benefits and we minimize the risk. So, for example, using it in time-limited ways, using it for very risky gatherings. And the last thing I want to say is, in terms of wavelengths, if this is the main limitation, then it should be a driving factor in choosing which wavelengths we have to use. And I should say, 222 is problematic, definitely not going into far UV. Some people want to go to 207, these krypton bromide lamps. I'll say, no way, Jose, we shouldn't go there. That's, I mean, unless the disinfection is an order of magnitude larger, the disbenefit is going to be worse. And the longer wavelengths are looking better to me. Now, seeing the talks yesterday, there is also the skin, there is other the disinfection. So I think it all needs to be factored together, but they're looking better. And that's all I have. Thank you.